Welcome to the Westminster tradition where we unpack lessons for the public service. My name is Alison Lloyd-Wright. I'm a recovering public servant and Managing Director of the Good Trouble Group. And joining me today on Ghana land are my fellow recovering public servants, Caroline Crows-Barlow.
Hello, Alison.
And Managing Director of Good Government Advisory, Danielle Elston.
Hello, Alison.
So these last few episodes we've been exploring a different kind of public service lesson. Not how things have gone wrong, but how big things get done. Caroline took us on a 2-episode tour through the history of the near disaster and ultimate surprising triumph that was universal credit. And then Caroline sat down with Tom Loosemore of Public Digital, who was critically involved in the reset. In the final episode of this mini-series, we're going wider. We're zooming out to say kind of beyond a single reform or a single policy, let's ask something more fundamental. What if the real problem in public sector reform isn't what we're trying to do, but how we're trying to do it? Caroline, once again you have beaten us down the rabbit hole. Take us away.
Look, I thought today we might try and encapsulate our reflections by working through a very interesting document called The Radical How, which was published by Nesta in the UK and was co-authored by Tom Loosemore of the previous episode. And it was released in the lead up to the last UK election, you know, when everyone's trying to get in the new government's ear to say, hey, let's try and do things a bit better and differently this time. And so this
time.
It's so true. Anyway, I do love those moments though, because you're like, what do we think is going to be different from the magic of just having had an election? But I guess things change. Anyway, one of the things that really stopped me cold in the Radical How was this it had this line, you know, it does all those kind of private public sector comparisons. And it said this thing like, Amazon has deliberately made many bets, several of which have come off. When it comes to change, the government tends to make one big bet and it doesn't always win. And I got to admit, I was like, bingo, there's something important there. And so this episode is about kind of what would it mean if we tried to maybe do it a little bit differently and follow a bit of a different method. So, and look, listeners and to you guys, just for context, I've read the paper, or most of it, but I know you guys haven't. And so
As ever.
No, you both offered to do reading in advance and I didn't set it as homework.
I opened the link.
I think that is nearly reading the paper in the current parlance.
I tried.
Exactly right. But what I thought we could do is we could just pick the eyes out of some of the things, but mostly just kind of riff on what jumps out to you as I take you through it.
First though, that sentence, one big bet versus many small bets. Yeah, right? And it's so challenging because I've been a part of so many projects or policy areas where what I have tried to recommend is a constellation of smaller things because no one thing is going to
solve it, grow it,
grow it, turn the dial.
Yeah.
Like it's inevitably a combination of things, but also that has the further advantage that if some of them don't work as well as you had hoped, you have other bets that you have put. But yeah, really struck by that one as well.
I have been thinking so much. You gave us a metaphor a while ago about in COVID about Swiss cheese and got to make sure that your defences, like the holes are in different places.
Yep.
Maybe you could do it better. I just did not do that justice.
If you imagine slices of Swiss cheese stacked one in front of another, each
intervention or policy or program.
Each slice of cheese has holes, but so long as when you stack them all together, the holes are in different places, you have an impenetrable block of cheese.
I love this. And I've been using that metaphor a lot, obviously, in the context I've been doing some thinking about childcare safety, and I've been thinking a lot about that, like the idea that it's not one thing but many things, which doesn't mean you give up on trying to work out which ones work better or not, but like the idea that there's one.
But why are we so attracted to a silver bullet? Why are politicians so attracted to a silver bullet?
Because they only get 30 seconds to explain it to someone. And I mean, where I come back to having like at least read some of my prep materials is you're talking about how we do things. We have to be able to somehow connect it to the conversation that politicians have with the community.
That's true.
Because a constellation of Swiss cheese works for us and we know that's what's going to work, but it is not no child will live in poverty by 1990. It is not every child gets a basketball. It's not
a laptop. Sorry. No, you're right.
And it's not that. And so how do we encourage our best political communicators to be a part of the championing of taking a constellation that might work?
Yeah.
And talking to the community about it.
Well,
All right. So CCB, I haven't read it. What is the Radical How?
look, it's not a checklist. It's not even like a digital playbook, although
Thank
it does.
God.
Show us your cynicism there, Dee. It's
Digital playbook.
but now my next sentence is going to sound stupid. It's a call to reimagine how governments go about solving problems when the answer isn't obvious and when the problem is complex, human, dynamic. So it offers 3 critical principles. First, start small and test your assumptions early. Don't pretend you'll know what works. Find out. 2, build multidisciplinary teams. Don't separate out your policy, your digital, your delivery. Put them all in the same room, working on the same thing. And 3, focus on outcomes, not outputs. Not did we build the system we planned, but did we help the people live better lives in whatever way. And I think, and it uses a metaphor that most governments treat reform like building a motorway where you kind of plan everything, procure and then deliver. Oh, P.S. Maybe we'll cut this, but maybe we won't. I've been thinking we really need to do an episode on the motorway that changed directions in South Australia. But anyway.
That's niche.
It's about policy compromises. Anyway, but real public
Trade-offs.
service.
It's Alison's episode.
It is trade-offs, yeah.
It's trade-offs, but real public service reform, it's more like crossing a delta, the path shifts and you can't see all the stepping stones from the shore. So does that metaphor resonate in any particular way? What do we think? Have you ever been in a project where you realise too late you're in the swamp?
Can I just, before we even get to the metaphor of the metaphor, take it literally?
Ooh.
Many senior government executives of central agencies, for example, departments of Premier and Cabinet,
Yep.
previous heads of infrastructure
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
agencies, and do tend to tackle human dynamic, complex policy challenges like infrastructure challenges.
It's true. And I think, in fact, I was having a chat with one of them the other day, and I think there are benefits and disbenefits to that, right? Like sometimes it can be quite helpful at kind of cutting through the kind of, we can make things in human policy feel too arcane and kind of too woolly and too whatever. And it can be quite helpful to have a bit of like, actually, what would it take to do a thing? But it needs to be...
Where are we at on the Gantt chart? And
well, do we expect to have any impact?
yeah.
Which I'm not sure we always do in human services policy, but it requires humility.
It requires humility, and like just in noodling in 4 or 5 different areas of social policy in multiple jurisdictions in the last month, it goes back to that thing of like humans do not experience government in Westminster silos.
Yes.
And we just are still really not grappling and getting a handle on trying to cut across those to build a single thing where our intervention may be a little on the housing, a little on the alcohol and drug, a little on the child protection and a little on the something else. That's 5 different CEs involved or whatever.
Yeah.
And we are still just not in any way kind of ringing that circle. Like humans are much messier than any journal, framework, or anything we've designed, and you find yourself constantly you're in the swamp and you're solving one thing, but you are tipping over a lever in someone else's area.
As you tread on it, it pushes the other thing up and someone falls off. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like those core principles, are we going to go through them in the episode? Because I have thoughts.
Why don't we start and go through them? We're going to go through, so from here we're going to go through a few different kind of examples, but I reckon it's worth just pausing on those core principles because I think they're really interesting. So which one do you want to start with, Dee?
Well, if we do it in order, start small and test your assumptions and don't pretend what you'll know what will work. You got to keep that away from the minister, right? Sorry, but they're not interested in the longevity a lot of the time. And that's not all of them. And, thank you to all our excellent
hashtag
ministers.
not all ministers.
Yeah, hashtag not all ministers.
Oh, I feel a coffee mug coming on.
I would wear that on a T-shirt, not going to lie.
But if they find out that you think you might have a nugget of an excellent idea that sounds really good, making them be patient enough to find out whether, yes, you're a well-regarded senior public servant, yes, you've got this great idea and it's based on something that someone else has done and you've got, like, you haven't come up with it out of nowhere.
Of course.
So in order to pilot it, and leaving aside that word, that's probably, in order to start small and test your assumptions, you've got a good reason.
Yeah.
They will hear that good reason and be like, let's go right now. And so there's that one just makes me scream, oh, can you keep it a secret in the bowels of your department until you actually know if it works or not?
Oh, but see, and this gets us to our first example that I wanted to talk about, which was COVID testing in the UK, right? So this might trigger Alison's soz if it does. But one of the things they did was they ran dozens of real-world experiments simultaneously. I reckon this might appeal to you, Danielle, as well because of the AIDS policy stuff. So, they
testing.
That's right. Mobile test vans, pop-ups in food factories, anonymous QR codes in underserved communities, tests in multiple languages, cab vouchers to test centres. Some of these things worked and some of them didn't.
Yeah.
And the system learned and scaled what worked. So, the radical how is very clear. These aren't pilots because pilots imply kind of what the system is. They're experiments, like hypothesis-driven, rapid and data-rich. I think you can sell to a minister, not I have one idea, but I have a series of hypotheses about what may or may not work, and let's see how that goes.
I mean, yes and no, because if one of those testing types failed to detect and stop a massive outbreak, that minister would be eating shit.
It's true, isn't it?
But and also, the social license was there, right?
I agree.
You're prepared to be experimented on when it's really clear the government isn't supposed to know.
Yes.
The government at this point is probably the citizenry. I think probably believe it's supposed to know how to educate our kids or put us through an AD or whatever, whereas the social contract is quite different. Whereas I think COVID, Alison, you're the expert.
No, I think COVID because no one knew, and everyone was quite open about the fact that no one knew, right? We'd never faced a challenge like this before. No one knew what was going to work in terms of, containment and so it did allow you to have permission to be experimental because it allowed you to acknowledge up front that you didn't know what was going to work, but you had a hypothesis you were going to try.
I'll give you an example of this issue of you're saying, what would experimentation look like in real life? And this is not intended to be dramatic, but are you prepared to let your children be experimented on? And I'll tell you a couple of cracking examples is do you ever really want your kids to be at a school where there's a new principal, a whole new leadership, where there's no kind of runs on the board? I've always been a little bit disconcerted by anything that wasn't very established for my kids because I'm like, oh, how would I really know if they're able to do this properly? So, we go through phases, team teaching, open classrooms with 90 kids, and I have always looked for have we tested this properly before I put my uber special, uber precious redheads through this system. And so, are we good at experimenting? No. Who wants to be experimented on? Is my next question.
No, see, I love this. Oh, sorry. I'll let Alison go first.
I read this fascinating article about these now grown adults who were experimented on and how they were taught English in the UK, integrated English language, where they were actually taught a whole different alphabet.
What?
Subtly different alphabet. Anyway, it's complicated. But now they're adults and they're like, I can't spell and I am behind on various things and I maintain it's because I was taught this weird experimental thing that was only taught in 30 schools.
See, I would make the more general meta observation. I was in fact thinking education is a brilliant example of this, that we are always experimenting on kids, right? And
we don't like it though as parents.
Well, it's what we find acceptable or not acceptable. And so parents know, for example, that things change wildly from year to year depending on the teacher. Whole language teaching would be a big, giant, multi-generational experiment that we've conducted on our children to pretty much now acknowledged poor effect. I think one of the things that we need to flip in our common conversation is the idea that we have systems which are optimized to do things perfectly now. And I think actually humans are getting better at it, like if you approach them humbly and kind of, I'm just being an idealist here, aren't I? But like I do.
I think you're nuts.
I don't know. I think there's something, and I was thinking about your ED conversation. We were talking about this before we got on to record. I think people are starting to kind of recognise the frailty of the systems with which they interface. And so someone coming out and saying, we actually don't know how to optimise ED flow through, and we're going to try a few different kinds of things and see which kinds of things work. I think a little bit more upfrontness about that is probably better received than management calling on the floor and saying you must exit.
I agree. It requires really strong communication skills that are hard in a nuanced world in a really kind of quick period of time. The one time where people are more than happy to be experimented on is when there's no other choice.
Yes.
So, like, if you are dying and they're like, look, this drug might kill you, but you are definitely going to die by the end of the year anyway, so this may turn out to cure. People are quite willing to go, the outcome is bad, or maybe a like jackpot.
True.
So I will be experimented on. I just think that there's a level of idealism to your idea that the citizenry doesn't expect us to know what we're doing all the time, and we would require a lot of help talking to them to start being a bit more. Turns out we don't know really what's going on.
I think my final thought on this one is I'm not convinced that everything that works at a experimental size and scales.
Yes.
Some things do, some things don't. And you get this whole preponderance around kind of place-based and community-based solutions. And while in general I tend to think that those communities have more in common than not, and that, not everything needs to be like a niche bespoke thing. Sometimes that starting small is great until you try and scale it.
Well, in fact, a slightly different but related point, I've been thinking about the Rick Morton piece in the Saturday paper today about anti-smoking evidence, and it's kind of making the point that there's been an orthodoxy in the public health research about how to diminish anti-smoking, and now we're kind of seeing the other side of this conversation as kind of increased excise is driving black market uptake, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm not sure about the kind of content of it. I'm not into that part of the world, but it did strike me that evidence changes too. Like what worked once doesn't always continue to work, that cohorts change. And so there's something, actually when we're talking about experimental, what we're really talking about is a willingness to keep learning about what works, which means you have to kind of be willing to look at some of your sacred cows as you go through. Our new head of
reinterrogating your assumptions.
Absolutely. Our new head of education in South Australia, I guess he's not new anymore, he's been there for about 3 years, but he talks about how he wants the system to be the best system at learning, like at learning what works. And I think that's quite an admirable aspiration, but it requires a huge infrastructure underneath, right? You need to be able to agree how you're going to measure what's working. You have to. And
the evidence part's really interesting. And so I was talking to senior clinicians last week about public health and about that, anti-cancer, anti-smoking. And we had a methodology that worked, ads, posters, for a very long time, and now
social shame.
And now, of course, like social media, the quickness, it's all funny, which is not really how we've done public health campaigns before. And so we've kind of just frozen for a minute because the evidence tells us what works online, but governments are not, like, it's not the way governments like to communicate with people to get them to change behaviour, and so we don't really know what to do about it.
Any other thoughts on the other two core principles, building multidisciplinary teams? I mean, I think we saw some evidence of that when we were talking about universal credit. Focus on outcomes, not outputs.
On the MD teams, all I would say is you need to invest time in learning to talk to each other because it's exactly the right way to do it, and I've seen it done 1,000 times and it's much better. But when you have the digital person talking to the comms person, talking to the lawyer, you need a strong leader or some mechanism that explains how to change the language between the disciplines.
Yeah.
Because they all have such lingo.
Absolutely. And there's a kind of a size limit, I always think, to multi-D teams as well. Like actually, once you get past a certain size, you end up siloing inside your team as well. So I think that's and more generally, I think maybe to your point about scaling, Alison, some of these ideas and ways of working you couldn't run a whole department like it.
Yeah.
And on the outcomes, not outputs, our systems of accountability, audit, estimates, they test the tests that did you build what you were budgeted for? We're not tested. We don't lose our jobs on the outcomes. We lose our jobs, or we are judged by whether we built the thing the government paid for, not whether it worked.
Absolutely.
So let's draw out a bit about that kind of sticky part about experimenting that Danielle was kind of alluding to. These are people's lives, right? They're real outcomes for these people, their entitlements. How does that sort of experimentation translate into the real world?
Well, look, there was a kind of a wild moment in the Tom Loosemore interview that really stuck with me because, like, one of the things I've never been able to understand in the universal credit world is how they started doing it in certain places and then moved out. And look, I was like, how did you do it? And he was like, oh, well, we just made full use of the Westminster tradition system of broad head powers in legislation and use of delegated primarily regs for me. And I felt quite uncomfortable as he described this idea. I mean, maybe it's because in Australia, pretty much our only experience of that kind of carve out has been in relation to income welfare, in relation to manage. Oh, why's the words am I losing?
You mean on that basics card?
Basics card, thank you. Has been in relation to the basics card, which, although it's a geographic exclusion, has operated in a really highly racialised way, has been acknowledged by a number of parliamentary committees. So I was quite uncomfortable with it. But I also, we do hit these points where people are like, it would be good to try and do things really differently. Like there's a real desire to turn the Etch-a-Sketch upside down in some of the place-based work and really try and kind of shake it around. So, but that does mean trading off different kind of abstract universal entitlements and then doing something different. So I was interested in other people's reactions to that idea that you might do welfare differently in different places, for example.
Yeah, and I'm really struggling to get over my kind of instinct that is unfair and that a lot of our system relies on a common baseline, right? And you might build off that common baseline, but you can't derogate from that common baseline.
I'm really keen on it. I just think what you could do is start to work with a Gen Z, maybe millennial kind of cohort. And by that, I think that from the Whitlam government to the end of the Howard government in Australia, we got more and more same for everybody. Everybody got the same, and we got far less. When you think about a lot of hospital social policy from before and around and after the Second World War, you got this if you were poor and this if you didn't, and that was fine. And that there was not a lot of kind of community pushback against that, whereas we got more and more I pay tax and universal to the extent of we built like quite high income earners into the family tax system, which brought a whole generation of people to believe that if they had small children, no matter what their income, they should get something for that. So I'm actually not uncomfortable with it at all, but I don't think you would ever get the social license with people so ingrained in 40 years of fair, equal fair, every player wins a prize. I think if you go to young people, I think they're more a combination of more individual and a bit more nuanced than a lot of their older cohorts. And I reckon you could try it generationally.
I like that idea.
I guess I'm interested in what you're saying about how do you create a learning organisation or a learning approach? How do you, within a legislative framework, which is often what people are in, create a scaffolding that allows learning and experimentation without kind of letting go of everything Parliament has otherwise previously agreed to?
I mean, I think it's really hard. Like I'm even just thinking about NDIS reform at the moment. Some of the big challenges are being fought out between the states and the Commonwealth about rule changes, right? Like, and these kind of quite specific, they're delegated ledge, but they're quite specific kind of
eligibility type things.
That's right. If you are in this category, you automatically get Y and Z, and that kind of carve out is proving very challenging. And I wonder what it would have looked like if they'd said, actually, let's try this on a particular state or a particular cohort. Let's try and see what happens in relation to that. I'm not sure. Like, I kind of think on the one hand you can see a premier sort of saying, well, I'm not experimenting on my state. But on the other hand, you could see a premier saying, right, well, excellent. So if we make that rule change, then let's pile in on doing the flip side of that, which is the non-legislated foundational support side of it. You know, you can sort of see how you
need
can
a
craft,
carrot, right?
That's right. You can see how you could craft. And it might force you to do both sides of the equation at the same time, whereas actually what has happened is that they're doing the rule changes without having done the kind of complementary carrot part of it because they've fought so hard on the rule change. Anyway, for all the reasons. I don't know, there's something there. It's about how do you get the social license? Well, you kind of have to acknowledge what the trade-off is from doing it differently and then say, but we're not sure it's going to work if we do it this way, so let's all hold hands and do this together in the best of intentions.
And this has got me thinking as well, is one of the ways we experiment with scale, but also with people getting different things, actually federalism.
Oh, totally. You know, and I love this.
I mean, yeah, like the competitive policy innovation of federalism.
100%. You just still constantly trip over things where you can't believe how different something can be from one jurisdiction to another, particularly community-based stuff.
Yeah.
So states that have big community-based, they have whole functions that in other states either don't exist.
Yeah. Or operate very differently.
Operate very, very differently. And I think that's exactly it's not well known though.
That's true.
Well, it's not just not well known. I work a lot in the national advocacy space and often there's a kind of sense that national uniformity is good.
Yeah.
But like I always think, just because it offends your sense of neatness doesn't mean it's like
it's
a bad
necessarily
policy.
good. Whereas in fact, if we were all trying to one-up each other, you get to a better
100%. And also our states can be quite different. Like I think the NDIS in the Northern Territory is a great example of that, which is like you can't create a market where there's no market, where there's no provider.
Yeah.
It is very different to run a small, highly dense state to a remote and regional. Like all of those types of things can be really different.
Yeah. So does the radical how give us any examples of what this approach looks like in the real world, Caroline?
Look, it gives some kind of thought experiments because remember it's talking to an incoming government. And one of the ones that I liked, because it sort of relates to some of the stuff we've talked about before, is it sort of says, what would it take, for example, to phase out gas boilers in the UK and replace them with heat pumps? In fact, relevant to our Victorian colleagues at the moment. And look, it's a huge mission and the UK is very credibly committed to net zero, millions of households shifting deeply embedded behaviour, big delivery costs, real risk of backlash. Look, and the Radical How's answer to this, like its recommendations to government, is not to write a green paper and legislate a scheme that announce a timeline. It's to start with a team. It's to do in the first 100 days, appoint your senior service owner with real clout, build your multidisciplinary team empowered to test and learn, run real experiments with households to understand what works, installation cost, trust, timing, and use what they learn to adapt and develop bits of policy before scaling. I read that and thought, that's a bit different from pink bats.
Radically, in fact. So if you missed our episode on pink bats, the, kind of too long didn't read version is home insulation program tried to insulate over 1 million homes in under a year. It was introduced really fast with very little understanding of the practical risks because principally it was an economic stimulus.
It was not about insulation in the first place.
It wasn't about insulation. It relied on small contractors who were often inexperienced with very little oversight and insufficient training, and it led to tragedy. 4 young workers died installing insulation in homes as part of that scheme.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really clear in that Pink Bats episode is that, as you say, the kind of the urgency the absolute, we must get a thing out right now, no phase 1, no safe test. What I think is interesting when I kind of turn that over in my mind is there was a comment by the universal credit guy who's like, it took us, 3 years to get the first 25% and then 7 months to do the last 75%, right? There's something about the falseness of that urgency and that actually going slow helps you go fast later, and that we haven't kind of internalised that either. So that's kind of one of the things I think I take away from this way of thinking.
Going back to that first example about Amazon, like if you think about pharmaceutical R&D, that's what they do, right? It's like millions of years and millions of dollars, not millions of years, millions of dollars.
Millions of human years.
And a long time to develop something that then, boom, you just roll out in a kind of much more universal way.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this is about our reputation and our workforce. So, like, what is the thing you hear most about, in the list of myths, cardigans, benefits, is that we're not fast and we're not nimble. And I would say in the last 20 years, it's become a point of pride for for people who are leaders to go, we are not going to be known for that. We're going to be known for being much more fast.
Yes.
It's not very complicated, but fast.
Yeah.
A bias to yes.
Yes, all of that kind of thing. So I'm trying to figure out how with that kind of environment and ministers' needs to immediately deliver and all of that kind of thing. So I think some of it comes down to a combination of what we want to be perceived by as, but secondly, what our workforce, like we don't have, because it's very important that no public servant is ever wasting any time anymore. It is not possible for the department, for instance, to do that 1,000 homes thing 2 years early, know that it's shovel ready, know that when the timing is right, we could scale that up, because if it's not in the headlines, we just don't do it, and everyone has to be working towards priorities and delivering government priorities. And it's not a priority necessarily to fiddle, and I don't mean fiddle meanly, but fiddle around with an idea for a year and go, oh, it didn't work. We probably should never put that up in a cab sub. Turns out you can't get small contractors to roll out lots of insulation because it'd be really expensive to train them or whatever was found. So it's like we need some capacity and to have like special people and units who are not their number one priority is not delivering on the 9 things in the strategic plan, in the whatever, to build for the future.
So when I worked in regional development, we had a big grants fund, and the complaint we always used to get from regions is that we were always asking for shovel-ready projects and funding shovel-ready projects, but no one would fund the bloody business case that was necessary to kind of work out if it could be shovel-ready. If it would actually deliver the outcomes that everyone wanted from it. And it's that same kind of point, like where is that time and investment in fleshing out the idea and testing it and experimenting with it?
And look, not to be Pollyanna, but I'm not even convinced you
I'm so glad you are Pollyanna, though. Otherwise, we'd all just...
It's true.
Danielle and Alison cynical take on the world.
Well, no, I'm not even convinced that you need it to be spare teams and different teams, because one of the things that you notice when you're in that very quick and responsive space is... I'm sure I've told you the brilliant story of being called in on my Easter weekend to work up an Iran policy. I'm sure I've told this story.
I think you have.
Not on the pod, I don't think, but
needless to say that CCB's ASO 8 brilliant Iran policy was
written over Easter.
Written over the Easter weekend was not the one that Australia eventually went with. But all of those you've got to come up with something very fast, and so people do really high, really reactive work, and then they wait for a month and a half while it sits in the minister's office and is thought about. And you
could have spent that time making it right. Oh,
well,
God,
no,
that's...
Not even. You could have spent that time making it right. My hypothesis is you should use that time to keep working on the idea. So I think we have this kind of crazy sense that, like, I've said a thing to the minister, they asked me for advice, should I do X or Y, and I've put up X and Y, and then I'm done. Well, no, how about you keep thinking about it? How about you go and do some more work on it? Like, I think there's something we disable ourselves because some advisor somewhere asked us for a piece of advice and I've written something down. I can change my mind.
Yeah.
Better evidence could come ahead.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So what would it take? What would it take for us to adopt a radical how in our public services and systems?
Well, look, the radical how, the pamphlet, the brochure, the book, the thing, ends with a 10-point framework. I will not read through them all, but we'll post them in the show notes.
Do people read show notes? Just read them.
Yeah,
I'll read them. Here we go.
Okay.
Number 1, make outcomes matter most. Ministers should care more about outcomes to further their own careers.
Oh, I like that though, like that it's like it is in your self-interest to get outcomes.
I mean, if it was in their self-interest, they would care about it. Now,
Totally right. If it won
if it won votes, they would get back.
And then it can be tricky to figure out what outcomes are. But
True.
And if you think about, so different departments, different governments at different times sometimes have, bodies which are designed to ensure that you keep your promises and particularly follow up on your election commitments. Are they delivering promises or paperwork?
Controversially, and knowing and being friends with quite a few people who've worked in one of those, I would say a lot of paperwork and a lot less on the promises. But sometimes you see the way they really do drive action, and it's so interesting how hard they find it to distinguish between, the 150 commitments which they did not need the paperwork on and were going to happen anyway.
And the 3 that were so high risk and
well, and that they didn't know were high risk up front, right? Like, so there's something to me there.
Yeah. Number 3, demand politicians set direction through missions, empower civil servants to determine how to make them happen.
I think I've mentioned on the pod that the they're not probably as incoming anymore, but Queensland government have done letters of ministerial accountability that are published for every agency. Love it. It says what they want the agency to do, and hopefully what that means is they step out of the how you make it happen. But it takes away a lot of the mystery of what you are being asked to deliver.
Yeah,
ministerial
I really
charters, if I've got the name wrong,
Yeah,
But
we all do charters. I don't think we all publish them.
they're all published though. So the challenge with that is then the most junior public servant can have their hands on the 4 pages that the chief executive has been kind of given as a mission.
But of course the challenge then is the most junior public servant will look at it and say, I can't see my business in that.
Yep. Number 4, add more teams to get more done because multidisciplinary teams are the best unit of delivery, not individual generalists.
I might have lost something in translation on that one.
I'm not sure they're not individual generalists. I think this is a table of people who think generalists have quite a lot to offer.
Preach.
But I do think add more teams to get more done is a obvious one.
Number 5, open up, let teams work openly, sharing their successes, failures and knowledge.
Woohoo.
Yep.
Number 6, fund teams, not programs. Invest public money incrementally with a bureaucracy that's proportionate to risk.
This one I want to spend time on. Yeah. Why do you love it so much?
When I have had really high performing teams, adding one person to them could have just, so in a resourcing sense, could have just kept knocking out amazing deliverables for the people and for the government. And then at other times I've had lower performing teams with funded lines and programs, and I'm just not sure that attaching people to programs all the time gets you kind of moving all together. It literally is very ticker boxy. It's like I fund the program, I wrote the thing, I delivered the thing, I opened the door.
Yeah.
But when we're talking here about, and I hate the word innovations, I wish someone would, but new things, test and try and new things. To say to a team, you've all got jobs for 3 years, you've got a bit of core work to do, and then like go build, be. Now that's me being Pollyanna. There you go.
No, but I really agree with that. And I think in fact it is so effective. And sometimes you then find things that you're like, actually, we could afford to tip lots more money into this, right? Because it turns out that we could scale this. But it's really hard. It's really hard to start trialling something that you don't have the money for in the big. So that's one of the things that I think stops us from being able to do this. It's hard to sort of send people out to experiment on something if you don't know that there's money coming down the line, if it works and if you wanted to do more of it.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think it like hits
And
this
it's hard in
business
the
case
reverse as well,
question.
having won the big money but then tried to roll it out as like a series of
Tests.
experimentations and tests. Then they're like, why haven't you spent all the money?
Yes. So this one comes against this business case question, right? Like it's like that we have this idea that you do a big business case for a program and you fund a big program of work. Doesn't sit well with what is a good way of working.
I also think there's actually, I know this isn't actually, I guess, really what they're trying to get at, but I have had the pleasure of working in and with some incredible teams that are just like efficient units, like a football team, right? Like it is the
Unbelievably
combination of people and their combination of skills and how much time and energy has been invested in getting them into the same culture and honestly, I think you could kind of almost pick up and drop, like football teams, the whole team of people into different challenges. I'm sure that's not what they meant.
No, I think that is what they mean. I really think
But
that is what they
rather than kind of
mean.
introducing new people and then trying to, like I think sometimes you can get a really humming work group.
Yeah.
How do you exploit
And
that?
if you fund programs, you deliver against that and nothing else. Like, so the person's attached to the program and we did it. We had to do 48 widgets this year and we did 40. There's nothing built into that to grow or change or do anything.
Or to learn that maybe it doesn't work anymore because like the young people are different.
And especially with public sector employment, it's like we can do that. So this issue of like, I'm in a great team, but my program's coming to an end. I better go looking for something else.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was working on the crack project in the big agency and I had such a great time, but it's coming to an end now and now I need to find my next thing instead of going, wow, this is a crack team. Let's give them a new problem.
Now I am triggered. Number 7, reinvent procurement. Buy or rent services that support teams, not simply to outsource outcomes.
I love this one because this is like, it's particularly an ICT phenomenon, but definitely not only in ICT. You see it in project management, you see it in all sorts of things. Like the idea that you want the capabilities in-house, by which you don't necessarily mean the technical expert, but you need the people who know how the use of that technical expertise becomes the thing that you're trying to do in the real world. And at the moment, there is a tendency to say, well, I will get the specialist consultant in to deliver the thing. It's like I like the idea, no, I'm delivering the thing and they are coming in and doing the coding or doing the whatever the thing is that's technical.
Yeah.
I think reinventing procurement, I can think of about 100 reasons why that would be a good idea and it feels quite pointy these days.
Oh, interesting. Why?
Oh, because it creates an industry of itself, right?
Yeah.
So you can be really good at government, you can be good at lots of parts of government, and unless you are in fact good at meeting the like whack-a-mole thing of the procurement, and it just massively favours big players who have full-time people, whether they're in tech, whether they're in consulting or whatever else, whose full-time job it is to provide your mother's maiden name and your blood sample and your insurance details, but only in Sanskrit and on a pink piece of paper. And if you can meet all of that, what you can do doesn't really matter. Yeah. And I think it's getting more and more so as we're more concerned about value. And I'm not sure that the things we do to ensure get value.
Well, and the other, I'd look at it from the other side of the fence, is the number of really excellent crack teams I see who nevertheless feel when it comes to procurement that that's the thing they can't do and it has to go to the specialist unit. And again, like, of course, like I'm not saying there's no specialist expertise, but that kind of like, well, they told me this is the only way I can do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And going back to that idea of like experimentation and certainty versus uncertainty, tender processes reward certainty.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they really do. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Number
8.
8, thank you. Train civil servants for the internet era.
I love how old-fashioned that is.
That sounds like it was written by a boomer, guys.
Look, I think Tom he's not a boomer, but he's definitely a Gen Xer. Yeah.
Sorry.
As are we.
Find, develop, and keep the best, most skilled people and reward them appropriately.
Look, what I would say about that in the current era, and I'm interested in your view on this, Alison, is how much time I've been able to play with technology since I came to the outside. Firstly,
Same.
I have an unlocked computer, so therefore, I don't have to go and make a business case to in order to turn on a feature in Outlook that is turned off. I
spent years just trying to get Chrome.
I remember.
I do remember your Chrome Wars.
And you then go from one agency to the other and you're like, what? I lost something. Oh, no, over here. That's really dangerous. It's very like internet security dangerous. And you're like, wasn't somewhere else? What do you mean?
Yeah. But it's definitely dangerous here.
Yeah. And so I think that the thing that we don't give public servants enough time to do is less train them for the internet era, because I really do hope that they're all in the internet era at this point, but to fiddle, like
yes,
to experiment, to learn, like we're very frightened, as we should be, cybersecurity, but we just haven't spent any time going, well, we'll create an environment off to the side and you can play with a bit of AI or you could play with a bit of graphic design.
The amount of tech tools I get to play with now that I never got to play with before, incredible.
Oh, it's so much fun.
In fairness, I think
it would have made my life as I would have been a better public servant if I could have played with them.
I think we did all leave government before ChatGPT, and I do get the sense that actually there has been a bit of...
So you're using Copilot?
Yeah, some versions of that.
Number 9, invest in digital infrastructure, open data, common platforms, clear designs, the basic foundation for everything.
Yeah. Tick. And just on that, speaking of that question of teams and not programs, let's stop funding digital infrastructure as a program or a project. And so then it's like it doesn't have ongoing existence. It's a wildly inefficient way of dealing with things, and we do not invest in it as an infrastructure.
Yeah. And number 10, this is the last one, lead with courage. Accepting and committing to reform is the hardest, but an essential first step.
See, now you know we're joining a cult, right?
I was totally going to say, could you pass me the Kool-Aid, please, Caroline?
And this is where I will avoid my true crime need to correct you that it wasn't in fact Kool-Aid. Oh my God.
Okay, sorry.
Why do we
You can send me my documentary watching list afterwards.
We'll put that in the show notes and see if anyone goes.
All right, so let's maybe bring this one home for a landing. If there's one thing that the Radical How makes clear, it's that the public sector doesn't fail because of bad intent. And I think that's always been clear in what we've discussed as well. It fails because it's not structured to learn, not legally, not culturally, not contractually. We reward control, we reward certainty, we reward output. But the reforms that work, the ones that really shift outcomes, they start with a different rhythm. They start small, they stay close, they learn fast, they keep going. From this discussion, what's one thing each of you would take into your next reform?
So for me, I would say that it's about curiosity and how you kind of frame up everything from the beginning in that curious framing. And I really am thinking a lot about Danielle's point about the politics of things. I reckon there are moments where you can find stakeholders who have been through the merry-go-round of being promised a thing and it not delivered one enough times that they're actually willing to go on a different journey. I think you go and find those different people and that's the starting point. I don't think you can just start it on your own. That's my takeaway from this. You have to start it with the people you're going to be wanting to work with. And I think there are more of them than we think there are.
Mine are probably 2 because I don't follow instructions very well. My first one is to do this, you need your authorising environment to give you permission for radical transparency.
Yes.
And I don't mean that inside government. I mean with the actual community. And they're not even stakeholders. I think that stakeholders can sometimes be a filter that stops us talking to the community. So I think you need to be able to go out to the actual public and say, this is the thing. The second one that I'm really now noodling around is if I was in that position again, it's like the question was that you take into your next reform. Mine is, what would I do 5 years before my next reform, which is find a way to, not secretly, any future employers, but below the deck start some of this stuff whilst still doing BAU, so that when the environment was right and the authorising environment was right, I had tested and tried more things than I think I would have done before.
And I guess mine, building on those, is I think just being explicit about where there are assumptions.
Yeah.
And that those assumptions need to be tested, and that part of rolling out X or Y is to test that assumption.
Yep.
And that's why we'll do it small to begin with and then look at success and scale.
And that's part of your competence. That's part of your brand, is being good at that.
Well, I think this has been a fascinating discussion. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Otherwise, the winner of our Westminster Tradition mug today is Celia Walker, who is always a great correspondent for us here at the pod and particularly loved the Universal Credit series. Thanks, Celia. We'll get that mug winging its way to you. And otherwise, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn if you have any thoughts or comments. Till next time.
Just some appropriately bureaucratic disclaimers. While we've tried to be as thorough in our research as busy full-time jobs and lives allow, we definitely don't guarantee that we've got all the details right. Please feel free to email us corrections, episode suggestions or anything else at thewestminstertraditionpod@gmail.com. Thanks to Pampot Audio for our intro and outro music. Till next time.